Counsel, you make some fine arguments, but one thing I'm having a hard time with is, am I correct that you say this case is essentially the same as Brown? Is that accurate?
This case is very similar to Brown versus Brown.
But isn't it true that in Brown, the statement made to students was simply observe a moment of silence? It didn't include any mention of prayer. Whereas in our case, the options presented to students were reflection, meditation, introspection, or prayer. Why mention prayer at all? Isn't that different than what happened in Brown?
Because, well, first of all, what we have to focus on is that it says or prayer. So the students have an option. And during this time, everyone is silent. So how could someone know if someone else is praying? Everyone is silent. They can either use the moment for reflection, for meditation, or for prayer. So there's a number of things that they can do. It doesn't have to be prayer. It's only merely one of the options.
But you explained the purpose of this was to give students, it was a calming exercise. That's the words you used. Wouldn't it have been just as effective of a calming exercise if the presentation was simply take a moment to reflect, meditate, or introspect rather than prayer?
Right, but just adding the word or prayer doesn't do anything to make it wrong. Because again, the students are silent. No one knows whether someone is praying. So they won't feel intimidated by other students to pray or not. It's just merely one of the options they have. I mean, we don't want to inhibit religion either, so they can have the option to pray also. But again, we have to look at this, perhaps the mention of prayer. Perhaps to some extent it does advance religion, to some extent. We have to focus on the law. The law says the primary or principal effect must be to advance religion. In this case, the primary or principal effect is not advancing religion. It may be an extent, but again, the primary effect is just to create an environment for reflection for the students. And when the government did this, it had a secular purpose because it wanted to stop violence.
The school set up a procedure, did it not, or do I have this wrong, with respect to selecting a student to lead a silent prayer? Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the school, as a state organization, was involved in picking somebody who was a student. The student said that she was going to pray, beginning this moment of silence. How does that fit into the mix here in determining whether the school has now sponsored a prayer?
Well, I'm not sure whether the student actually told the principal that she will pray. It just something happened during the course of the speech as she said it. It was a private speech. Now, the fact that the school has to have the ability to do whatever it thinks necessary to make an effective administration. So introducing just a mere moment of silence as a way to calm the students down, to provide a better day, a moment of reflection, and its purpose to stop violence also, is absolutely legal. And we don't want to make we don't want to make schools stop having that ability to make an effective administration. If it would have advanced religion, and that would have been the primary extent, or if it would have excessively entangled with religion, then that would be wrong. But it's not doing that. It has nothing to do with prayer.
Well, silent prayer is an option.
It's one of the options, but it's not the primary effect. The primary effect is not advancing religion. Prayer is just merely one of the options. And the school is not excessively entangling with religion. It's just not enough. I mean, unlike in the Lee versus Wiseman case, there is no rabbi. And unlike in the Santa Fe case, it's not an invocation. Because clearly in that case, it was clearly an invocation which included prayers. And in this case, prayers are just merely one of the options. No one knows whether someone is going to pray. The fact that Nina Stein said this does not does not make the school excessively entangled with religion. And that's the key word, excessively.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Santa Fe is actually an interesting case in that certainly the majority focused on the invocation aspect of the exercise, but the actual policy, as I recall in Santa Fe, talked about either making a statement or, which is something that you emphasize, or doing an invocation. Does that have any impact on how we look at this case?
Not really, because again, in Santa Fe, it had a very long tradition of saying prayers. And it was obvious to any objective observer in that school that this message was going to be religious and it was going to advance religion. In our case, it's merely only one of the options, and it's not excessively entangled with religion.
Counselor, would your analysis, the school is majority Christian, right? Would your analysis change?
You mean which school?
The school in question here, in this case, majority Christian. Would your analysis change if, let's say, 8 times in a row, the speaker who was elected happened to be a Christian and prayed as Nina did? Would your analysis change?
Well, I think to say that Nina prayed is wrong, because she didn't pray. Unlike the rabbi in the Lee case, she never said amen. She actually said in her speech, she said, I will personally pray. So she warned everyone. She said, I will personally pray. And the other students, during the actual moment of silence.
Isn't the key consideration then whether a reasonable student may have felt coerced by what can arguably be called a prayer?
Well, the student wouldn't be really coerced. Again, if you look at the law, did the government excessively entangle?
Don't we need to look at the effect of the law? And isn't there a crucial difference between this case and Brown, that in Brown, they looked at the text of the law, but they never analyzed the application of that law or the effect of that law and looked at it just on its face. Don't we need to look at the particular circumstances and see where the procedure leads? So if a school is majority Christian and you have a case where time after time a person gets up there and recites what arguably can be called a prayer, shouldn't we take that evidence into account and try to figure out whether the law has a religious effect?
Well, I would disagree with you. I don't think it coerces any student to pray. Because again, during the actual moment of silence, the students have a variety of options. They can either pray, meditate, use the moment for reflection. They can do any number of things. And during this time, everyone is silent. No one knows what everyone else is saying. So I don't think the primary effect is coercing all the students to pray. And again, I wouldn't call this a prayer because she never said amen. She only said, I hope that you will do this. But it's not enough to excessively entangle with religion.